Hey everybody, so this is going to be a country roads take me home. Leaving work early. I got a couple things. I got to stop by the post office, and then I got to stop by pharmacy to get my meds. But unfortunately, I'm going to be heading back to the hospital. It's nothing major. It's just sort of a nip it in the bud before it becomes an issue type of thing. My left foot is killing me. I had that second wound develop, pressure wound. We had put on the boot on the left leg because we figured that would sort of help that to protect it a little bit, and ultimately it seems like it wound up causing a problem on the outer part of the foot, and the lower leg up halfway up the calf is just really painful. I don't know, it's just sort of one of those things, like I don't have a whole lot of feeling on the left side, so when I start getting to 4 to 6 in the pain scale, I know there's a problem. The leg's really tight, the ankle's really tight, the foot, what's left of the foot, that's my midget foot, or my little tiny foot. It's just, I don't want this to develop into something where, say the infection goes in the bone or something like that, and I gotta get my foot cut off or something like that. So we're just going in, get them to check it out. I'm probably going to have to be on IV antibiotics for a couple hours because I'm on oral antibiotics right now, and it's just not cutting it. So prayers and thoughts and all that I'd really appreciate. It is what it is. Yeah, I've reached a point where it is what it is. But once again, thank you everybody, and let's go on a country roads take me home. Alright, so we're coming up on 934 just south of Annville. We're going to go up through Annville to the P.O. box, just a quick stop by there for both my P.O. box and the channel's P.O. box, and then I got to quick go down to Palmyra to pick up 2 of the meds that are in there. I have a antibiotic that the doctor prescribed for me that's there for the continuation of the antibiotic I have to be on, and then one of my normal prescriptions. And I just don't, I doubt I'd be in the hospital more than like 2 days at most, and I doubt even that. I think it's sort of bad because it's towards the weekend, and weekends they don't like to release people. So I'm hoping it's just something simple, like I'm in there for 10 hours, they put a bunch of IV antibiotics in me, and usually within 3 hours I'm feeling a lot better, and that gives me enough of a good punch on whatever's going on with the foot that it gets me on the road to recovery, and then I can go back to what I'm able to do at this stage. But depending on how long I'm in the hospital, if it is just a short while, I am going to do some video editing. I'm going to take advantage of the time that I'm just sitting there doing nothing except having blood taken. So stabby, stab, stabby, stab, stab. I'm going to try to get a couple of these videos edited and have a number of them for next week that I already have basically done. I just need to edit and add a little bit more material history-wise. Get a couple... have a whole bunch of shorts ready as well. I just have to get them edited together and add a little extra information, because a bunch of them are why is it called that, and I just have to get some more information on the people that they're named after and add that into the shorts to make them more informative and interesting. We are coming up here on Annville, Pennsylvania, going north on Route 934. As you can see, the colors are just starting to change. Not a whole lot yet in this area. You have a couple different types of trees that change a little early, because you can see some that are yellow and red and all that good stuff. But we're getting to that time of season. I want to do a number of those Country Roads Take Me Home Fall Edition. So I might hit a couple of the ones that we've done before and a couple new ones. Because I think last year I sort of didn't get the timing right on some of them, and I'd really like to get the timing right on a couple of those. I have to look back and see how they looked, but very, very interesting. Annville, Pennsylvania, got a pretty little church coming up here, stone church, and right next to it is where we've talked about, done some videos on the Jerusalem Cemetery, which was the oldest cemetery in Annville, and that's where the founders of the town were all buried, which was right over there. There's the monument. This is Christ, United Church of Christ, or Christ Church, United Church of Christ. You got the Beaver House, which is on the National Registry of Historic Places right over there. Very neat place, built by, I believe, a James Beaver. I believe that's how it is pronounced. He was one of the merchants in town. I always go off to the side. This building here, actually, interesting enough, this was originally a carriage garage where they basically did the early carriages, but then they turned, went over to motor vehicles at that time. And then they just took out the garage door holes and basically made it into apartments now. But I believe it's called like the Carriage House or something like that, is the name, Carriage House Apartments or something along that line. There's a number of interesting buildings here. Lebanon Valley College, we've got an awesome history as well, and I am going to pause here. Alright, so now we are leaving Annville. I stopped by the post office. I want to say thanks to Jay. I got your card. I appreciate that. I'm getting older. Feel older, especially today. Just tired. But thank you once again, Jay, for the card. And I just wanted to stop by, get a couple of these things out of the way, just in case I wind up being in the hospital a little bit longer. I doubt it. This is pretty early on in the process, but it's, like I said, it's more of a nip it in the bud before it becomes an actual issue. And because of the last time that infection got real nasty real quick and started attacking organs, operating a lot like sepsis, I don't even want to give it an opportunity to have that happen, because honestly right now my immunity is probably not that great and my body is a little beat, so I'm going to be a lot more susceptible to something turning nasty quick and coming after me. And I've said it before, I don't really want to mess around with this too much, because I don't want to mess around with it at all, because at some point my body just can't take one punch after another, and eventually it's the one that winds up does you in. And I don't want to get to that place, so we're going to the hospital to get a little pokey and stabby and figure out what's going on, get some IV antibiotics is probably what's going to happen, and go from there. They'll have to do a bunch of blood testing just to make sure what's going on, see how elevated my white blood cell count is, just to get a general idea. And I think from looking at it, and I think the big thing too is I don't want this infection to go deeper than the skin right now, or top layer of tissue, because once it does that, that's where I have to start heading into, you might have to have amputations, and quite frankly, there's not really anything else to cut off on the left side besides the foot and probably up to the knee, and I don't want to do that. So, but anyways, probably going to cut off here shortly, because there's not a whole lot of interesting stuff to see coming up into Palmyra, and then I'll get us back on after we leave the pharmacy. But this is Palmyra, which was founded by Johann Palm, or John Palm if you Englishsize it. It was back in I like to say 1760s. It was originally called Palmstown, and then they changed it Palmyra, partially after the biblical name, I believe, Palmyra. Someone had said that was in Syria, maybe present-day Syria, I believe. But it was a biblical town, and also the connection with Johann Palm. He served in the Revolutionary War as a surgeon and doctor, because that's who he was. He was Dr. John Palm. and I believe he served directly at the Battle of Brandywine. And remembered one of the stories he used to love to tell was the story of George Washington fearlessly going up and down the lines on his horse, encouraging his men. And that was the story you hear a lot of. He had an amazing courage to do that, because you're up on a horse, you're a 6-foot guy, you're a big target. And back then in the war, the way they fought, it was very much a quote-unquote gentleman's war. So you didn't shoot the officers or generals on purpose, because the thought in the British Army was, if you did that, the common man, who were the soldiers, wouldn't have anybody to lead them, and they would just be chaos and just murder. So the officers kept everything in line. So in that way, it wasn't common that they'd go after him, but you're still a target. So that was his favorite story he used to tell. I believe his second wife also had been kidnapped in the French and Indian War. I'm not sure if I have that exactly right, but I believe that was another story that they had. But he came over here from Germany. He had heard about the Benagel's settlement, which is Benagel's church is. It was a German settlement, and went there, and then eventually bought all this land, like a lot of these guys did, and created the town of Palmyra, at that time Palmstown. But real interesting guy, interesting little town here in Pennsylvania, in between Annville and Hershey, Pennsylvania, which I'm sure that's familiar because of the candy and something like that. Something delicious. But with that, I will pause again, and we will start up after pharmacy. Alright, so we are heading north out of Palmyra. We're heading out on Old Forge Road, across the train tracks. Choo-choo. Heading home. Here's some of the pretty trees. You can see some of the colors that are changing. Red and oranges and yellows and all that good stuff. I love fall. I love the color change. I'd like to, depending on what happens today, I'd like to get up to Jim Forge, and Ralph and I are talking about, we're going to start discussing doing our next adventures. So we're going to try to get together to do something on like a Tuesday, and go from there. We're going to turn right here, because we're going to go by our one of our first videos. This is when I was starting to figure out what I was doing when I first started the channel, and still didn't know what I was doing. But it was just a little cemetery that I had stopped by. Trying to think what the name of the cemetery. It's named after the road Nafziger. The Nafziger, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, cemetery. It's a really neat little cemetery that you go around the corner, because this is coming up behind Penzeys Supply and the quarry here. And I thought, hey, why don't we stop here at this? I was still uncomfortable with stopping at places and doing all that, because you have no idea what you're doing. You have no idea what the rules are. I wasn't real aggressive with stuff at that time. And this is like one little place that's sort of secluded. I was like, let's stop there, check it out, and look at the history. And I didn't originally I don't think on that one, I didn't give the information directly. I didn't even know what it was called, because Jay and Rebecca had been after me about use Find a Grave app, and I was sort of like, and then I started using it. I was like, yeah, I get what you guys are talking about, because it was awesome being able to, wherever you were, you'd know what was going on with that cemetery. So it was very good advice that they gave me. But this is the cemetery right around this corner here that is up here on the right. And it's just a neat little cemetery. It has a guy that's a World War II vet, which is sort of the most ornate of the things, and the most recent, but it's a little cemetery there. But that was, I think, third or fourth video for the channel, because first one was the old Presbyterian, old Hanover Presbyterian cemetery there in Grantville. That was the first one on July 4th of 2021. I think then, I'm trying to think what the other one there was. I did St. John's pretty early on, and that was a two-parter because I didn't know how to edit videos. Oh yeah, that was so bad. And the sad thing is, it's so easy to actually edit them together, but I am like not techno savvy, and I was having a lot of issues, and I just gave up. So I was like, oh, we'll just do part 2 then. And that was also the funny thing, like, you're trying to come up with like your catchphrase or whatever, and mine was just long and just strung out, which fits my personality because I blab on, but it didn't work. And then it just developed into, we'll see you all about town. You know, they like to say simple is better. Yeah, it just works. But that's a cool little pond that I took pictures of. I think I used that for some of the haunted stuff, because it's a real gloomy, if you do it in black and white, it is a real gloomy pond, because it has sort of that algae on the top, and has an old boardwalk, or whatever you want to call it, a little walk out onto the water, and just looks sort of terrifying and scary. This is Palmyra Belgrove Road. Done a lot of traveling on this because I lived over here in Steelstown for almost 2 years, well, a year and a half, until everything sort of fell apart. But we visited this little cemetery here, the Blauck Family Cemetery. It has, I believe, a Christian and a John Blauck from Bern, Switzerland, who were the first two of the Blauck family to come over here to the New World. And I think it was like 1750 or something like that, 1760, in that general range. It's right in the French and Indian War period. But then St. John's up in Steelstown here was actually one of the men that started the church, was David Blauck Sr., who was David Blauck at the time. He was actually probably the grandson or great-grandson of one of those two men. So it's sort of like, that was the epiphany I had in the channel at the very get-go, was how much history is so connected. Even though it's only a mile away, I mean, so it's not shocking, it's still just sort of cool, you know, 80 to 100 years later, his grandson, great-grandson, maybe even great-great-grandson started a church here that's standing till this day. And it's sort of neat how all that works. A lot of cool learning experiences. I think the biggest learning experience for the channel was how much history is actually out there. You know, right out your back door, there is just a ton of history. And you just go out, research it, and go out and explore. And you find all kinds of neat stuff. And I know, like, even with the different places we visited, there's a couple we visited several times just because they're such neat places. So well worth a trip. Steelstown would be right up there on the hill. And we're going to be heading over here now to Belgrove, Pennsylvania. And at some point we need to get back. I did try to do some filming when my phone was going bad last winter. I tried to get filming done at Christ Lutheran Church in Belgrove. It's right along off 934, but that didn't work very well. I got some pretty neat pictures of the place, but I do want to go back, talk a little bit more about that history of that church. It was one of the daughter churches, I think the third daughter church of Hill Lutheran Church, which is the oldest Lutheran church in Lebanon County. It's not the oldest church in Lebanon County. That actually belongs to, I believe, Tulpahawken Evangelical Reformed Church. That's the one with the White Rose Memorial to the Wister family. That's also, we just visited, Isaac Meyer is buried there in the old Reformed cemetery. But that's the oldest church in Lebanon County. It predates it by a couple of years. Benaggles as well is considered one of the oldest churches, because there was sort of some debate. I was talking to a gentleman at Hill Lutheran, and he's like, yeah, there's sort of debate. Is like, no, Hill Lutheran predates it by almost 10 years, actually, I believe, because I think they're considered, I think it's 1723, I believe, 1723 or 1728, somewhere in there. I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but Benaggles, I believe, is like 1733, somewhere in that range. So it's, the church buildings may be around the same date. Like, Benaggles Church is older, the building. That was built, I'm trying to think if that was 1770s, 1780s. Whereas the first part of the Hill Lutheran Church that currently stands today was the early 1800s. But their original building, like most of them, was a log structure. And Hill Lutheran was very unique because it was open to the heavens. It was just a large four-walled log structure, quite substantial, was used as a place of refuge during the French and Indian War, but it was open to the skies. And part of the reason it didn't last very long was because it was open to the elements, and obviously it's going to cause problems. And then they created a building committee, and the Burgenmeister, which is the German way of saying the building master, and that was one of the Heilmanns who are buried there right next to the church, was the Burgenmeister, and was behind engineering architect for the part of the current structure that stands there. And then, like always, a lot of these churches, as they grew, their needs of the congregation grew, they would wind out adding on to that structure. Much like we talked about St. John's ECC, that has a lot of add-ons. It just, over the years, your congregation grows. You had a Sunday school, and a regular service, and it all sort of changes what the needs of the church are at any given time or era. But this is now where we're heading into now, is called Union Waterworks. And Union Waterworks, if some of you guys remember, especially if you watch Cliff's series for the Union Canal, this is where the northern branch went off the Pine Grove. The main canal came through here. They had a huge dam, and then the northern branch, of course, went north out through Jonestown to Lickdale, or what would have been known as Union Forge at the time, past Greenpoint and on up through Suburg into Pine Grove. And that was to provide water, which was, well, very much needed with the canal, because especially the Lebanon area was very porous with the limestone. And so they lost, I think they said, almost 70% of the water they would lose. So that was northern branch. A lot of the reason for it was for water for the canal, but it also was to open up to the coal region so they could bring back the anthracite, and go as far as like Philadelphia or wherever it was needed, Philadelphia, Reading, and they would take that around on the Union Canal. Now, that section of the canal only lasted till 1862, when they had that famous flood that killed, I believe, 9 people. Where I think there were 2 dams. The way Cliff was describing it, it sounds like there were actually 2 dams up now where Sweet Arrow Lake is. One was called the Burger Dam, and the other one was just known as the Big Dam. It was simple. I said earlier, simple is better, and it works. But the Big Dam broke, and I think the Burger Dam was down below, and that was owned by the Burger family. And when that it's just sort of cascading effect. You'd have one dam break, the water go down, it would hit the next dam, that would break. And then it got down to, I think there were a couple other dams or other things that were in the way, they all broke. And then it hit the big dam, the Swatara Dam, and that broke. And that's where there was a lot of water. And that's when it went down through Union Forge. That's where it killed all those people. Cliff gave the harrowing account. So they talked about one gentleman there with his boat, told his wife to go, she left, and then he went and tried to save 2 of the families, where the majority of them were lost. There were 6 of the 9 were lost between these 2 families, and they didn't listen. like, oh, we'll ride it out in our homes, and that didn't work. And sadly, most of them were killed. And then I think a little further down, the Proudfoot family, the wife and two of the daughters were killed, swept away. But that ended the northern branch of the Union Canal, because it was just, the devastation was that great. It was as if though the canal never existed. So to put all that, and at that stage too, maybe if the Union Canal was still strong, they would have been like, let's rebuild, so on and so forth. But unfortunately at that stage, railroad was starting to come through, and they were starting to lose their traffic to that. So I think the writing was on the wall and the money wasn't there. Civil War also did not help. You know, a lot of these forges and furnaces that were all over the place, they lost a lot of the young men that worked for them. They had the business, it just, that really hurt the little forges. The big forges did well, but the little forges eventually just got put out of business because of it. There's some pretty trees, red and oranges. This is Heilman Road that we just turned onto. This is named after the Heilman family, which was so prominent. And if you keep on going on this road and go down to, there's another little town there, I forget what it's called, but then you have Heilman Dale, which is named after them because that's the two first guys, the brothers, that came over to the New World. They settled their farms right there, and it's why it's called Heilmandale. It's a pretty little cute town. Bunch of these homes there, maybe some are original, but they look more Victorian era than anything, but just sort of really neat little town to go through. Very, very small town, but still, needless to say, it's always neat. These towns, like, why are they called that? You know, you sort of get it. Like, they have over, going over toward Berks County, it's still Lebanon County, it's called Frystown. Well, obviously the guy's name was Fry, and you just sort of wonder who was the gentleman, the Mr. Fry, that Frystown was named after. But you have all those different little towns that they're named a reason. We're going past now Mount Ararat, right in this region. We talked about Mountville is named after that topographical feature, and it's the Mountville in Lebanon. Not incorporated or anything, it's just what people have always called it, is Mountville. One of those little unknown towns, but that's the town that I live in. So, but this is a pretty day. Unfortunately, it's going to result in me going to the hospital. But as always, I want to say thank you, everybody, for coming along. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. A little bit of history that comes with it, talking about the early times of the channel, things like that. Some of the fun, some of the reasoning behind it. How awkward it is when you first start doing something like this and you don't know what you're doing. But it turns into something really, really amazing and fun. And so I want to thank you all. And depending on what happens at the hospital, I'll give you guys an update. I think it should be pretty much, here's some IVs. We're going to have you on them for like 8 to 10 hours, and then you can go home. I don't even think it's going to result in an admission, which is what I'm hoping it doesn't. But as always, I want to thank you for all coming along, and I appreciate your prayers and thoughts and all that. And as always, we will see you all about town.